Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Walter Isaacson of the Aspen Institute, and I want to take this opportunity not only to welcome you here, but to talk for a moment about the importance of engaging the diaspora both in the Middle East but around the world. It's something I was talking not too long ago to Judith Roden of the Rockefeller Foundation, and she was saying how effective it is to engage diaspora, the business leaders from around the world, is a key tool for supporting economic and educational development. I think it's particularly true in North Africa. This panel about the North African diaspora and engaging the diaspora opportunities is hosted by our group, Partners for a New Beginning. A lot of people are here, including Tony Verstandig, who helped run Partners for a New Beginning, Anna, and many others. The Partners for a New Beginning is a public-private partnership which aims to advance locally driven initiatives in areas of economic and educational opportunity. It was something that grew out of what Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice asked us to do in the Middle East. But over the years, every new secretary has come in and wanted to make it a little bit bigger and a little bit broader. So under Hillary Clinton, it became Partners for a New Beginning, which is a full partnership all over North Africa, the majority Muslim nations, and other places in this world. Hey, Mark, how are you doing, sir? And now Secretary Kerry has taken a particular interest in this because of his keen interest in economic development in this region. I happen to be one of the co-chairs of Partners for a New Beginning, along with Mukhtar Kent of the Coca-Cola Company, and of course the chair, Madeleine Albright, who keeps us all together by seeming to chair everything, or at least co-chair everything. What distinguishes PNB is that it's not an American organization sending out the word on how to do things, but it's determined and set by local partners groups in each country who really set the agenda and run things. And our role at Partners for a New Beginning is to help facilitate that and help coordinate it, but not help dictate it from on high. I think that is why the diaspora communities can be critical in not only advancing the economies and education, but helping to coordinate the role of people on the ground, our partners in these areas, and people in the business community in the United States. Many of you are already giving back to your home country in a variety of ways, whether it's through remittances, mentorships, investment in entrepreneurs, supporting youth, and other things. We'd like to use part of today to map out the various diaspora initiatives and their role in investing in home countries. We also hope that this event will help us better engage the diaspora from North Africa very specifically, especially to directly connect the diaspora to local efforts to advance entrepreneurship. I think now I introduce Tony Verstandig, although it doesn't say so on my next page. But I have a rule in life, which is whenever I'm stumped, I introduce Tony Verstandig. Tony has been an advisor at the State Department, has been through many incarnations in many administrations, but we're happy to have her as a senior counselor, a thinker, a strategic advisor, and somebody who's helped put together both our Middle East programs and our Partners for a New Beginning. Tony Verstandig. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today. It's a pleasure to be here. I just want to deepen some of the remarks that Walter mentioned and to stress and underscore our interest in the opportunities presented by the diaspora community and the philosophy of our Partners for New Beginning partnership. We're interested in hearing from you. We're interested in trying to advance investment opportunities in the region. We're interested in convenings that can catalyze ideas that are translated into actionable deliverables on the ground. Many of you, Terry McGee's looking at me here. Terry's one of our steering committee members, and Mark Ginsburg, our ambassador, former ambassador to Morocco, both of whom have been partners with me and with this institute as we've mapped out this initiative. What we need is to listen to you, to create mechanisms for mentorship, to build on the opportunities, and as we reference them, the success stories that are peppered throughout the region. And I think all too often we focus on what is not possible. We want to focus on what is possible and how we can engage in meaningful partnerships and advance mentorship opportunities to catalyze these investment opportunities in the region. We all know that North Africa is not the first go-to opportunity here when American private sector is looking at investment opportunities, but it should be an opportunity. As the region is evolving, I think North Africa needs to be looked at not in its individual capacity, but both as in its regional capacity, but also as a link between the U.S., we have a free trade agreement, for example, with Morocco, and how that can leverage broader opportunities. Mark Ginsburg was very much instrumental in that initiative. But how we can leverage these opportunities and not look at them as one-off. All too often, that's what we're doing, looking at things in a one-off environment. So as we look at this region, I want us to look at how we can see North Africa as an opportunity intra-regionally, how we look at the youth and the entrepreneurship opportunities and building out ecosystems and mentorship. Mark has been very involved in a franchising as our colleagues at the Middle East Investment Initiative, which is a part of an initiative here at the Aspen Institute. We're looking at how we can incentivize franchises to grow opportunities in North Africa and the region more broadly, and how we can look at advancing a knowledge-based economy in North Africa with entrepreneurship and job creation. In that regard, I just want to point out a couple of, as my colleague Vanessa Zuwebi, who has been deeply involved in this initiative and has been extraordinary in thinking outside the box and in advancing these opportunities on the ground. But the Ibn Khaldun scholarship program that has, it is a pilot program, started last year, and it's a very interesting opportunity which began in Algeria, and for the first time, graduate students from Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Libya gathered in Algeria to talk among themselves and to connect in a business school environment, to discuss opportunities for entrepreneurship and investment, and it is occurring again this year, and we are looking and very much supporting that initiative and working together with them and building out an opportunity. In Tunisia, we have been working to support a Tunisia Smart Center, which is another opportunity to help build out that ecosystem of entrepreneurship and lashing up, as I call it, a knowledge-based economy with a tech economy that is emerging in Tunisia, and with the business school there in Tunis, which is a very impressive operation. So we have meaningful partnerships that we are trying to advance, but I think what we want to do is look at how we turbocharge them and figure out how we get the stickiness of those opportunities to get them sustained and build on them. So with that, I would like to I look forward to convening our panels and continuing this conversation. Vanessa, do we introduce our panels? Would our panelists like to join us here on the stage, please? Thank you very much. Vanessa, do you want to come and introduce the panelists? Vanessa? Mahmoud, are you?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I think you've been welcomed by enough people, so I'll just add my welcome, particularly to Walter and the Aspen Institute for convening this event, and also to Tony, who runs the Middle East programs. But also importantly, Vanessa and her team, and Anna and her team for pulling this together. I'm very excited about this panel because, while, Arab Spring has happened and has started political openness, I think unless the economic private sector gets mobilized, we're really not going to see much success in terms of sustainability of the momentum potential in the region. And I personally think the private sector has a huge role to play, and I'm sure all of the people in the room understand that. That's why you're here. And I view the people in the room as really the most critical people in the room, not us, not these guys, because we're going to talk a lot, but when this session's over, you guys are going to walk out of here and hopefully do something. And that's really what this should be all about. So I hope all of you ask lots of questions and get a lot out of this panel from the beginning. I'd like to talk a little bit about my perspective on what the opportunity is, because anytime you're trying to mobilize people to do something, there's got to be a reason for it, and a compelling reason. Well, there's the general, want to support the countries that you're from as they go through this difficult period of transition. I call that altruistic, reason for doing it. But I'm an investment banker. I come from a financial perspective, and we're talking about mobilizing capital to sponsor ideas and connect entrepreneurs with opportunities in the region. So I look at it from a little bit of a narrower perspective by saying another really good reason to do this, to be interested in this space, is it's a great opportunity to make a lot of money. And why do I say that? I look at the market. It's very opaque. It's very hard to figure out how to do things. It's very efficient to mobilize capital and people. So, typically when you have inefficient markets, that's an opportunity for huge investment returns. But you have to have the right sort of ability to navigate the landscape, as well as figure out how to assess risk. The two biggest issues, I think, for mobilizing capital into the region is how do you assess and then manage the risk, and how do you mobilize the networks and navigate the local landscape, both regulatory, government, political, local business practices and the like. And again, those two things I think can be best done by the diaspora community, and I look forward to engaging the panelists in that question. And I guess the other thing, you have the bios of all the speakers, so I'm not going to go through that and waste your time doing that. But I would say we have three great panelists who come at it from very different perspectives. Some of it they're all actively engaged in taking advantage of this opportunity, which again, conceptually sounds great, but making it into practical reality is a very difficult thing, which leads back to the complexity of the opportunity. But these three gentlemen are very actively involved in it. They do it from a different perspective. Driss does it from an institutional capacity at Citicorp. He takes a pan-regional view, a Maghreb view, and he's going to bring his perspective also with respect to Morocco and the specific opportunities in Morocco, as well as a specific idea that he's fostered. And we have one of the entrepreneurs that Driss has been involved with, who coincidentally is also called Driss. So we'll hear a little bit we have a tangible example of a project that works. Mohammed's going to come at it with a slightly different perspective. He knows a lot about Tunisia, and he's also going to talk about how that focus on a region has been married with a focus on a sector, tourism. Because by combining two things, that's another way to catalyze momentum by focusing your effort on a particular sector. So Mohammed will bring that perspective. And lastly, Nuruddin will bring the perspective of Algeria, because he's very active in the Algerian professional investor community as it looks to the region. He also happens to be a scientist, and we'll talk about something called the CASBA Angel Network, which is a group of professionals out in Silicon Valley that has been looking at investment opportunities in the tech sector. Again, these are three very different angles at it, but hopefully you put together the mosaic of approaches that people are taking and take something away in terms of how you might be able to do something to capitalize on this opportunity. So I'm going to ask the panelists to just make a few opening remarks, then we're going to go into questions, some of which we'll all take. But the most interesting part of this is always when people in the audience reach out and talk a little bit about specific opportunities or questions they have on their mind. So with that, let me turn it over to Driss and have him share with us his experience and his take on the opportunity.
Well, first I want to thank the Aspen Institute. I think this is a great opportunity for us to come together and start a dialogue about diaspora and investments and how we can get involved in different opportunities in this landscape or ecosystem of entrepreneurship. The Maghreb Growth Economic Fund was born as part of a PNB-NAPEO delegation to the Maghreb back in 2011, where we went to Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, looking for young entrepreneurs with bright ideas that were looking for mentorship, as well as access to capital. And with that experience, we decided to create an ongoing program that will actually provide those services or that kind of support to these young entrepreneurs starting in Morocco. So the Maghreb Growth Economic Fund is basically about providing mentorship as well as access to capital for business models that are not only confined within the Moroccan territory, but also that have linkages to the United States, where entrepreneurs can bring their products and services to the United States and distribute them. So we're allowing for those business models to actually grow outside the country and take advantage of the free trade agreement, as it was mentioned before. And so to close my remarks, we decided not to go on a broad basis, but yet focus on one example, one case. We call it the proof of concept, and that's why we invited our first entrepreneur that we've been kind of mentoring from the start all the way to coming here to the United States to start his company and distribute his products and services. So with that said, I'll leave it up to questions and to the panel to go in details in this model.
Let me ask you before you leave, because it's such an interesting example and probably the only tangible example we're going to have. Can you talk a little bit about how you found him and what you're doing with him, just high level?
Well, it's the whole idea of diaspora. I met Driss in Miami. He was at the University of Miami, and I was hosting an event for the Moroccan community. And he came to me with the idea about his business, and it was brilliant. So it just happened that I had just got back from the PNB-NAPEO delegation. And with my partner Amin, who was also here, we decided, why not? Let's turn this to a business where we can provide this mentoring. We are Diaspora. He's a Moroccan entrepreneur. He went back to Morocco, actually started his business, and we brought him back so he can become an American-based business that actually distributes Moroccan products. So this whole concept of the PNB-NAPEO entrepreneurship came to life with this example. So we learned a lot. We learned how we cannot repatriate capital. We learned about how we cannot bring money that is required by the United States to start an investor's visa. We learned about all the issues of foreign exchange. We learned about regulations. We learned about the whole free trade agreement aspect and how it can or cannot help. And because of that, we created this proof of concept that now is allowing us to take it to a broader scope.
Thanks. We'll look forward to hearing more about it in the Q&A. Mohammed?
Thank you, Mahmoud. I'll echo, I think, Driss's comments around thanking PNB-NAPEO and the Aspen Institute for really bringing these 3 diaspora groups and 4 diaspora groups, I should mention Libya as well, together. It's really refreshing to see so many friends and familiar faces in the room today. And so that is, to me, a tangible asset and really an achievement that PNB-NAPEO was able to bring together. My role as the leader of the Tunisian American Young Professional Association, we have a professional diaspora group that was founded after the revolution. And the purpose of the group was really to support the revolution somehow, because people were energized after the revolution. We quickly found out that if we wouldn't be focused, we wouldn't be successful. And so we focused on the economic and business threads, simply because that is where our skills were, and also because, to your point, Mahmoud, if the economic revolution does not happen, there are little chances for the political revolution to really succeed. Specifically, our focus has been on 2 threads. First, investment, and second, entrepreneurship. Investment, meaning that we've been promoting Tunisia's value proposition in the forms of presentations to investor groups, to chambers of commerce. And we've learned a lot out of that experience. We've learned the things that worked. We've learned how to make the story a little bit more compelling. We've learned, we've made our share of mistakes as well and learned from them. And at the end of the day, truly became better ambassadors for the country and its value proposition. And then in terms of entrepreneurship, what we've been doing is really a mentorship program, to focus on young entrepreneurs, providing them with mentorship, with technical, financial, moral support, frankly, and also trying to help them achieve that first success to build that needed momentum, whether it's a first prototype or a first customer, or access to capital for the first time, sort of really achieving that momentum by having that quick win, that first quick win. I'll conclude by saying that being in Washington, a number of us are in Washington. We've also taken an advocacy role in the sense that we've partnered with a number of U.S. government programs to really try to promote certain sectorial areas in Tunisia. In particular, we have a program with the U.S. Embassy in Tunisia to promote Tunisian handicrafts in the U.S. and help Tunisian handicraft producer export to the United States. So that'll sort of fit well with also the tourism aspects that I will talk about.
Right. Nuruddin, you want to share your perspective from the scientific angle?
Sure. First, I'm really, really happy to be here, and I also want to echo my colleagues and thank the Aspen Institute for holding this meeting. For me, it's already a success because I already met people that I didn't know, so that is already a success. So hopefully we'll have more successes, but that's a wonderful one. I am a scientist, as has been said here, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what's happening with the Algerian groups, and in particular, we'll focus more as the afternoon goes on the Casbah angel investors. But just to give you a perspective, the Algerian diaspora in the United States is relatively new in this country. So a lot of people came to this country, basically started to come to this country in the 70s. It was mostly in France. And so as a result, it takes some time for us actually to get going and to get to know each other and create something, a dynamic. But we started to see this dynamic. We started to see Algerians trying to connect to each other and trying to do things. And there are various groups now that are trying to work. I'm actually the president also of a new president of a newly formed group called the Algerian American Foundation for Education, Culture, Science, and Technology. And where we are trying to, under that, we're trying to develop exchange interactions between the U.S. and Algeria in terms of youth, in terms of education, and so forth. There's also other groups, and the group that in particular that is interested in high tech, and that's the Casbah Business Angels. They got together in California, Silicon Valley, and I know most of them. I'm not part of that group, but I know most of them and almost all of them. But it's not just people from Silicon Valley. It's also investors from Algeria, from various groups in Algeria. But that group decided to invest in high tech. And the Casbah Business Angels is the first private investment group in Algeria. It never happened before. So as we're going to talk, I think for me, one of the key things that we can do is to change the culture, is to change, who is going to do what for what goal. In Algeria, or maybe it's the same in other countries, this is new. Having people with private funds coming and trying to help the youth in getting their own ideas from being an idea to a product is really new. I was lucky enough to give a talk, I think about 8 months ago in Algeria at an event called Fikra. And after my talk, I realized actually they were also giving awards to 10 high-tech, again, youth. And I looked at, I heard about some of the inventions and so forth, what they were doing. And some great ones about, how do you preserve water? How do you use your phone to do high-tech things? And there are a lot of applications in there. So as we move forward, we'll talk about that. But for me, one of the key things first is actually how do you change the culture of the youth so they can take their future in their own hands and design it and dream it. Not only dream it, but design it and actually move on it. Thank you.
Let me start with a few questions and then open it up to you guys. Mohammed, maybe you can talk a little bit about specific. There are a lot of opportunities for tourism investments in a lot of emerging markets. Tunisia, in particular, is at the top of many people's lists in terms of a target destination for tourism investment. Talk a little bit about how you're mobilizing investors to look at Tunisia. What are the issues they see, and how do you help them navigate it?
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess just to put things in context, the tourism industry is an industry that is vital for Tunisia. It actually feeds about 25 to 30% of the population. It creates about 500,000 jobs, but feeds about 2.5 million people. And for a long time, this industry has not been able to reinvent itself. So it was focused in the 60s and the 70s, truly in coastal areas, Mediterranean type of tourism. And then as sort of the other destination around the Mediterranean developed their own products, the quality, the profitability of that particular offering went down. And even the quality, I think, of all the services that are attached, sort of the ecosystem of the tourism industry has fallen down. So the idea was really a simple one. It was to really, being in the United States, being a diaspora person, wanting to connect with Tunisia a little bit more, to try to develop an exchange, a flow of people. And tourism came as a sort of a natural thought. And so the idea was to change markets, to the U.S. market, but also to change offering and really leverage some of the cultural, archaeological, historical treasures of Tunisia that, to this day have not been leveraged enough. And in fact, you see a lot of, some of the reasons that triggered the revolution was the lack of opportunity in the regions, in the interior regions of Tunisia. And believe it or not, that's where you find most of the archaeological treasures of Tunisia. And so it sort of all made sense and jived around sort of this concept of a new market, a new offering, and also a contributor to regional development. So the challenge with that was to identify the segment of people, the customers, with the hope, obviously, that these customers will come, be satisfied, and potentially become investor later on. So the first challenge was really to find this target segment. The second challenge was to identify the proper people in Tunisia who could make this happen, so that the service, the quality of the service that's provided, is really provided with the needed the needed essentially quality to really make it an attractive product. And the answer to both problems was essentially a niche strategy. So both on the customer side, where you have sophisticated travelers in the United States, generally older, who have been everywhere in the world, who are looking for a new destination, who are looking for a country that has 3,000 years of history, where they can really discover some new things. In general, you find those folks in the East Coast, the West Coast. They typically are older. They typically talk to specialized travel agencies, and that was sort of the focus. So there was no point really in advertising sort of broadly to, on the internet or something. And then on the other side of the equation, which is really on the Tunisia side, it was a matter of finding smaller boutique hotels that cater essentially to very sophisticated clients that could, dynamically and flexibly change their offering to fit essentially what you're asking them to do, and then also to design trips that have, some, fair trade embedded into them, some ecology embedded into them, because believe it or not, the tourism industry is having a profound environmental impact on Tunisia. Sometimes you talk about choice between tourism and agriculture, because there's not enough water to essentially sustain both of them. But the bottom line was really to find a group of people who are motivated, who could provide, who are English-speaking guides, etc., who could really make it happen at a small scale. And so the combination of this niche strategy and this small-scale set of reliable providers really provided essentially this combo that allowed the company to grow and prosper and bring a regular flow of tourists in Tunisia. Believe it or not, even in times of crisis, that type of clientele doesn't care if there are crises, if there are connections. There's no direct air connection between the U.S. and Tunisia. They don't care about, staying in Frankfurt or in Paris overnight. It's sort of more of a sophisticated clientele. And the result out of it is, I started this in 2002, but the result was that in 2009, 2010, there were investments that translated out of this. Call center, Stream, has a call center in Tunisia that was essentially a client that came, through my company. So there is, an investor is also a tourist in the beginning, just so that he senses the level of sophistication of the country, the level of infrastructure. He sort of interacts with the people. And so that was essentially the results of that experience.
Can I make a comment? So just to take the example of tourism and connecting that to diaspora, and I always believe that the first generation has the strongest ties to the homeland. And then as you have children, their ties to the homeland will fade away unless there's some kind of a recurrent program within the family to take that child back to the homeland and introduce them to the family. And I think there are different diaspora communities that have different experiences around this. Some have lost their ties to the homeland after the second generation and so forth, and some have not, because they have this kind of systematic, formal programs where they take children back to the homeland and teach them about the history, so forth, so on. So taking the case of tourism, there's this idea, again, with diaspora where on an average, everybody, first generation at least, goes back to the homeland once a year, so forth, so on. Now, it's all about vacation and fun, and especially when you take the children with you and you don't introduce them to other aspects of how diaspora can get involved with the homeland, it remains about tourism. And I think there is something, and again, this is an open discussion, an item for discussion later, is how do you start to introduce within this vacation time the investment opportunities? How do you start to introduce mentorship? How do you start to introduce other aspects of being in the homeland during a period of time besides just the tourism? And I think this will sophisticate these ties of the diaspora around other flows that are today inexistent. Again, remittances are there for a reason. Mostly, these are folks that come here, have a career, they build a future, and then they will have a home back in the homeland, or they will send money to their home, to their families to sustain them, as you said. But again, what about the second generation? How do you create those ties? How do you introduce them to other aspects of how they can be involved besides just, again, visiting this country once or every other time for tourism purposes?
I think in my mind, the real question, you're right, Dries, is to differentiate between the home country and any other vacation. Because if you're going to the home country and staying, say, at an apartment or at a hotel, and just, obviously you need to recharge battery but you need to sort of communicate to the children and the second generation that same sort of passion about the country. And for that, to me, it's very simple. You need to have them discover it. Us, Tunisian, in general, we don't know our country. In fact, this experience has provided me the opportunity to know my country, to know sites, archaeological sites that nobody talks about. And so visiting all these areas and really being a more informed tourist and sort of, builds ties with your countries. And if you can transmit those, that love essentially to your children by making them visit, by seeing all the different facets, I think that's certainly something that will help in the future. Increase those connections.
Definitely agree with that. Let me ask you a question. When you were catalyzing the providers of this product that you were trying to sell to markets, to segments here, particularly high-end segments, to what extent do you try and catalyze the providers or producers of high-end product here to invest there? So it's not just a local Tunisian groups that run small hotels, but it's the Four Seasons or someone more sophisticated hotel operators who can bring expertise, capital, and so on to really take it to the next level. Did you try and mobilize that group of potential investors?
In my capacity, I guess as a quote-unquote small tour operator, I have not tried, because I think the lessons learned for me very quickly was that I needed to keep this very niche. The moment you sort of take it up to the next notch or the next step, then you really need to sort of develop that infrastructure. And you're right, but in my capacity as sort of the type person, the Tunisian American young professional, we've had a number of discussions with investors, and in particular, franchises, hotel franchises around bringing their expertise, bringing their products, etc. And what we discovered was really that at the end of the day, those companies, you're right, they're looking to mitigate risks. They see the opportunity, but they're looking to mitigate risks. And the old ways of mitigating risks that we thought would work are not working anymore. So for example, saying that, Tunisia is, strategically located, that it has a young population, that it's at the crossroad of trade routes, etc., not enough. Even, believe it or not, fiscal incentives are not enough, because investors, they don't look at fiscal incentives first. They look at the value propositions. And so at the end of the day, one of the things that worked, I think, to a relative point, was this notion of sort of presenting Tunisia for any investor as a hub, because it's a small market, and for them to really have the justification to invest, they need sort of to think a little bit broader. This hub that provides them the opportunity to, perhaps expand their operations to Southern Europe, to the Middle East, to Africa, etc. But then we went to Moroccan presentation and Turkish presentation and found out that they were saying the same thing. So it didn't work. So really, at the end of the day, what comes down out of a value proposition, and this is I think could be valuable to everybody, not Tunisia only, but Algeria and Morocco as well, is to think about sort of what differentiates your country from a risk perspective. What are the ingredients of stability? Do they exist? Do the root causes of stability exist? In our case, for Tunisia, I think the number one source that sort of gives us hope for predictable stability, not stability in the short term because we're going through a transition, but predictable stability is the widespread level of education that exists in Tunisia. So that is something that is a true differentiator, at least for our particular standpoint. The second thing, and I'll be very quick, I'm sorry. The second thing is the role of women in society. And that is a differentiator again in Tunisia, because women are viewed as stabilizers. They're viewed as, when they participate to the economy, as a risk mitigator. So that is something also that's very important in our value proposition. I would say one more thing, which is this notion of openness. People now talk about sort of, with all this political transitioning happening in Tunisia, we are a country that has no choice but to be open. It's very simple. Tom Friedman was writing an article in the New York Times a few weeks ago, saying that a country like Tunisia, and in fact probably Morocco, and to a lesser extent Algeria, they cannot afford the contradiction between economic growth and ideology. And so we're forced to be open, and I think the combination of education, of women, of being open, of needing to be open are really those ingredients, those roots of predictable stability in the future.
Thanks very much. Let me turn it over to Nuri and talk a little bit about the technology-based initiative, because throughout the region, there's also, given the high level of education there is, particularly as you go further east, there's a lot of emphasis on sort of technology companies and technological capacity building, and great business, asset light, good ways for entrepreneurs here to get involved in serving markets there. And also part of the PNB membership here, the steering committee includes people from Microsoft, Cisco. Those guys are doing a lot of business there and are creating lots of jobs and markets there. So I'd love your take on how you see that playing out.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you. I think one of the things the question that we need to ask ourselves, and that is, what are we trying to do at the end of the day, whether it's tourism or high tech or anything else? And for me, what we're trying to do, or at least the Algerian Diaspora, the group that we work with, what we're trying to do is to make a contribution, to contribute to a point where the countries that we're trying to help, Algeria in this case, is liberated, i.e. will not depend on the diaspora forever. Will not depend on us meeting in DC trying to help somebody in Guelma or somewhere else. So I think that's the goal. So how do you make a contribution with the knowledge base that we have here, again, whether it's tourism or anything else, so that the countries themselves can actually see the value in this and will by themselves try to, and by country I mean the people, and will by themselves will try to get to a point where they are, they're working and they're, productive in high tech and tourism and agriculture and so forth. Now, if you go to the high tech in particular, there's a reason why in Algeria we've picked on high tech. Well, there's a reason that the association, that the various associations are with, is focused on science and technology. Well, number one, there's a historic reason. Algeria has invested a lot in education of the STEM force, of the science, technology, engineering and mathematics STEM force in the 70s. Most students who went abroad at that time, I would say the vast majority, I don't know the numbers, but I can judge just by looking at the numbers, the vast majority was in STEM fields. So now we have, as a result, we have a first generation, because our parents weren't, but first generation people who are scientists, engineers, mathematicians, etc., innovators, creators. Well, second reason is a global reason. I mean, we all know, and it is seen that actually science and technology is playing a bigger, a larger role in our everyday life. Whether it's in telecom, whether it's in medicine, whether it's in homeland security, whatever the field is, it's playing a bigger and bigger role. In fact, if you look at the statistics of the labor department, it shows between 2 years, I can't remember which years, I think it's between 2008 and 2016, the number of jobs in the US that are going to require STEM fields, STEM background, is going to grow up tremendously by 30% and more. I think it's 38%. So STEM and high tech is going to play a key role. Science is going to play a key role. So in Algeria, there's a lot of youth that actually are in STEM fields. The problem is, as I said initially, is a culture thing. So in the system in Algeria is such that when you graduate, you have a tendency, traditionally, to wait for a job from the government, to become an engineer or to become a technician or a doctor or an architect or whatever it is. But the idea and the culture of now I've graduated, I'm trying to think about how do I start my own business, my own idea, with some investment that can come from the government, can come from somewhere else, is new. And that's the culture change we're trying to achieve there. So to go back to the Casbah Business Angels, they've had 2 competitions. Actually, some of the people who have competed I do know because I worked in my lab for a few weeks. So what they have done, they held 2 competitions, which is positive. They've had a lot of business proposals, high-tech business proposals. And these 2 competitions were at least initially showed that if you want the youth in Algeria, and probably the same in Tunisia and Morocco and Libya, is very hungry to actually do something, very, very hungry. But they don't know how to do it. And they don't know how to do it because there is no history, there's no role model in the country that says, well, here's how you do it. There are a few, but not in high tech, okay? Not in high tech. So those first 2 competitions, out of those first 2 competitions, one of them got funding. I can't remember the level, but it was modest level. But the problem, and actually I said earlier on, I was in Algeria in a few months ago and I gave a talk, and when they're giving these awards, I was talking to some of the youth, and they were women who actually won this competition. They were starting a business, and they told me, they came to see me because if they win that competition, they get $100,000 from the government. The government has now competition, not for high tech, for anything. And they can get, the program is called L'Ensage, something for the youth, des jeunes, emploi des jeunes. So they got $100,000, and these youth, I've talked to these youth who won the awards, came to me and said, you know what, I have never had $1,000. I don't know what to do with $100,000. So as a result, we talked, and now all of a sudden, so what we decided, or what we thought would be a good idea is actually to give them mentorship, to have people who will take them and help them with their business plan and move them and see how they can pay taxes and all these things. And a company in Algeria, I think it was Jezi, a telecom company, agreed to mentor some of those guys. So now you have these big private companies being not the mentor as such, but almost like, holding hands with these small companies and trying to do that. And I think it's too early to judge whether that is going to be successful or not. But again, it's a culture change that we need, because we know we need at the end of the day that the youth wants to do this by themselves, and they're not going to rely on $5,000 coming from Pasadena, from Omar, or from somebody else. But that, this actually will get into rolling a ball so that things will start to roll from there.
And what role did you play? That sounds like a really powerful combination of youth being excited, government sponsorship with capital, as well as other local businesses sort of getting involved. What role did you play to catalyze that?
What role did I play personally? What did
No,
role
the
the Casbah?
organization, more generally,
absolutely.
What role can the group in this room do?
The role that the Casbah Business Angels played, and I'm talking about, by talking to the people, because again, I'm not a board member or a member of that group, but I do talk to them because I'm a scientist, so I do look at the technologies rather than the business plan itself. So the role that actually the Business Angels have played, they have shown that the Algerians in Silicon Valley who have done this and have been successful. And you can. And the second role that we do, and my role as a scientist, is actually to ask them those questions. Is this a technology that's going to hit, because Algeria is a small market, let's face it, is it going to hit the world? If that's what we're looking for. You might fail today, you might fail tomorrow, that's okay. But let's just try to keep working on it until. So I put them in touch with some top scientists in the US to give them advice. And guess what? The group that won actually went to a competition organized by Microsoft in Australia, came third in the world. Okay, so that's what we want. So we want to challenge them so that they raise themselves to a high bar. So at one point they become again liberated and independent.
Yeah. What a great story. So the local members of your chapter will get involved, get on the phone, help vet, guide, and connect.
Correct. Now there's a pre-selection that happens in Algeria with the local people there, and then also the angels from mostly from Silicon Valley. They go there and they look, and then there's a pre-selection that takes place at that point. And then in May, I think for this year, in May they come or will go to Algeria and look and talk at the business plan and then select a few. Yes.
I have a follow-up question or observation is based on this experience of mentorship and what you guys have done. How do you tackle the whole entrepreneurship culture in the sense of building a business and letting go? Because when we see this from the investment side, and now we're talking again how Diaspora can get involved in investing in some of these projects, in addition to how other investors may be interested to do that. One of the issues that I have come across is that the entrepreneurship culture within the Maghreb region is build and own for life and pass it to your children. And that's something that entrepreneurs, investors in general, don't get attracted to.
No, exactly.
Have you encountered that in your experience? I know you're doing it from a scientific point of view, but from a business point of view, have you encountered that?
I don't think we have reached those questions yet. Maybe they're going to come sooner or later, and probably will come sooner than later. But I don't think we have yet. I think at the moment we're just trying to encourage them to go. And should they pass them on to their children? Actually, there's something else to pass on. That's very good. But but I just hope they'll be successful and they have something to pass on to anyone.
High quality problem.
Correct.
Driss, why don't you talk a little bit about the most specific example in the room in terms of where things stand with your business plan, and you should feel you guys can tag team it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You think he helped you, and how he thinks he helped you.
Yeah. No, I think and it's very interesting, and the more events we participate in and the more we listen to others' experiences, you get enlightened about the whole entrepreneurship space in the Maghreb region. Because one thing is to read about it and listen to examples and go to events and meet others that have experienced entrepreneurship in the Maghreb. That's one thing. The other one is to actually go and do it, and doing it as an investor. And also with mentorship. Because once you do that, and I'm sure each country is different, because when we were in Algeria, there were a lot of complications about even owning a business if you're not an Algerian. You encounter things that, again, to enable an entrepreneur to build a business within that country framework, the business framework, and also to take their business outside the country, is full of challenges. And it's not only challenges, these are barriers that will stop you at any one of these milestones to actually just let go and move on. And so what we have done is actually do exactly what I just said by mapping the whole process of starting a business in Morocco, doing the lab work, going to the packaging part, establishing a corporate entity, taking your business outside Morocco, coming up with the capital that is required for you to leave that country, establish yourself outside that country and start to distribute to other markets. And by doing that, we have learned a lot. And I can say that it is a proof of concept that will allow us to eventually grow our portfolio and have more credibility with investors. Because at the end of the day, if you want to do a roadshow and go and talk about how you would like to take American investors or diaspora, to this case Morocco, to invest, you need to either give them transparency or give them some kind of assurance. It's all about taking risk. But risk is not an unknown. It's not just a hole, a black hole where you basically don't know where you're going. So in this particular scenario, and again, I welcome you guys to have a chat with our guests that we brought in from Morocco to actually network and get to see how it works within the entrepreneurship space here in the U.S. I encourage you to talk and discuss your own questions and concerns. But I want to leave that aside and talk about something you brought to the conversation, which is how do you build industries? And you told Mahmoud why can Hilton go to Tunisia and build large hotels? I think the PNB-NAPEO and the whole private-public partnership has to be about that. I think the large local businesses or small ones within any one of these markets need to think outside their environment and allow large corporations to come and establish frameworks, governance, processes, train people, and grow these industries. I think the industries as they are within these markets are not sustainable for large global economy. I think they're good for local economies, but they're not good to be globalized. So, just to take on that comments maybe for later, is how do we start to bring large corporations to build industries as part of this PNB-NAPEO partnership? Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Driss, do you want to add your perspective? What do you think that was the most important contribution that was made by the outside support that you got?
First, I would like to thank the Aspen Institute for inviting me, and thanks also Driss and...
Do you want to come here so people can hear? Thank you.
Hello, everybody. So I would like to thank the Aspen Institute for inviting me here. And thanks also Driss and Amin for being my mentors and helping me to achieve my goal, which is to launch a cosmetic line named RD. So my story, to be really, really short, at the beginning it was a school university project, and I came back to Morocco to launch a Moroccan brand and sell it to the US market. And after when Driss and Amin created the Make Fund Growth, we chat together and we realized that we should do the opposite, create an American brand with Moroccan products. So the mentorships came here and they helped me with their experience to create an American brand and to learn about the American market and all the business models in America. So for me it was a great experience, and I wish to be very successful.
we all wish you that too. Okay, let's open it up to the audience, please.
So at least for us in Tunisia is deal flow, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you want to create enough of a backlog that gives you enough of a choice as an investor. So what do you guys do now? I know you have your initial case study. So how did you do it in Morocco and possibly in Algeria to create that sustainable deal flow to continue and incite investors to come in? It's not about one or two special cases. We're looking more of a deal flow.
Yeah, there's plenty of deals within at least the market that we looked at. The issue is not the amount of the deals, is the depth of the deals. Yeah. So the market is very fragmented. The market can work better if you create an economic bloc as a Maghreb instead of just Morocco, and look at it as a region. But you're going to need to have the regulations and the agreements between the countries to allow that to happen today. It's not the case in some situations. So that's on one hand. And the other one is it's very much micro. So I mean the investments or the seeds are not large amounts as you will see them as in the VC space. I think it's all about building the credibility and the experience and be able to eventually consolidate all of that and have a pitch that you can go and look for investors. So I think as we build this model, we have learned in phase one, and it's not about just one example, it's really all the linkages that are required for you to stimulate or to enable any entrepreneur to do the exact same thing. And without those tools and those linkages, you just can't. It will stay at the pitch level. It will not get executed. And as you can understand, it's a very complex model. This is not about just an entrepreneur selling in the local market.
So how would you recruit the next case?
Yeah,
The case, and
that's what my partner does, yeah. Mm-hmm.
We didn't find the challenge. It was never about the deal flow. The moment you raise your hand and you say, I have money to give to sponsor a business, you'll get approached by everybody. And in fact, you know, we like to say Dries was introduced, but I personally went through about a dozen deals before we elected to go with it. There's a few deals that I still have, you know, that we're ready to pull the trigger on. So it's not so much that there is no deal flow. It's what do you do? Each one of them will come at you with different, I would say, elements and characteristics that make them from the little exotic to the super exotic. And that's really what it is. At least in Morocco, I spent, in 2012, I spent about 6 months in Morocco. Networked my way through the different organizations, the competitions that you hear about for young entrepreneurs. Went through some banks, went through local funds, went through the private investment clubs, went through a bunch of, you know, events. And, you know, every time you shake hands and you hand off your business cards, we decided not to advertise. We could have easily taken an ad on one of the business magazines and said, you know, Maghreb Economic Fund is here to invest into businesses that are focused on exporting, you know, goods and services to the U.S. I'm sure we'd have gotten flooded, and maybe it would have hurt our reputation. So I'm not sure what the specific challenge you run into there, but for us that was never a problem. That is not a problem at all.
and this is a specific sector that you pointed, or you
No. Actually, I have a technology background. Dries has a banking background. We have other mentors that are involved with us that come from the luxury retail industry, which we're leveraging in the case of Dries. We have people with pharmaceutical background. I mean, we really we cover a lot of the segments that are relevant in Morocco, and you know, that was not the challenge. And Dries kind of alluded to it. Really, the biggest challenge we find is the exit strategy, especially when we're dealing with local business. There were some fantastic opportunities that we just had to walk away from because we couldn't see the exit. The profits were there. We could have shared profits for the rest of the life of the account. But for, you know, investing from the U.S. and you needing your money out of there at some point, or, you know, or wanting to exit out of the business to go invest in another one, that's what really took a lot of imagination.
could incorporate in the States.
Sure. You know, believe me, we spent a lot of money on lawyers and accountants, so just put it that way.
Any other questions? I'm mindful of our time. I'd love to take some more from the floor. Yes.
Thank you very much. My question has to do with the way you compare and contrast the North African diaspora in the U.S. to the much larger community in France because of the francophonie and that whole notion. As a second part to that question, how do you think the capacity of this community in the U.S. can be harnessed more effectively? Are there more institutions that are needed to bring them all together? Is it better access to policymakers and sources of capital that's needed? That's the second part of the question.
Let me add to that, if I might. As you talk about it, one way of scaling up is also picking up on Tony's point, which is looking at these opportunities across the region as opposed to country specific. So if you can add that to your response.
In terms of France versus the U.S. or France and the U.S. in the case that I'm going to talk about. Again, what I said earlier on is that the Algerian diaspora in the U.S. is new compared to France, for example. It's very, very new compared to France. If you look at the time scales, France started just when the French invaded, more or less, and this is recent. So, but what we've decided to do is actually there are a lot of networks. With Algeria and France, there's a lot of things going on already. But we learn from that. We're trying to learn from that. So we get together, there's in various areas of science, technology, investments, and so forth, literature in France. So we try to connect with them as much as possible to see what they have learned, what they're doing. Of course, it's different. I mean, there's a lot of differences. But it's okay to connect and see, because at the end of the day, we all go to the same point, the source. The second thing we've done is we try to connect all the diasporas in the world under a new organization called IDA, which is based in Geneva. So IDA now has a board, and this is an international organization of Algerians abroad. Everybody, whether you're in Australia or Ghana or in the US or Chad. And it tries, at the moment, we're trying to see who is where and how, what is their expertise, and what can they add to whatever we're trying to do. So, but this is again all new. So IDA, I'm actually on the board of IDA. IDA is just held meetings in Lyon, in Toulouse, in France, in Paris, in Montreal, in the US, in California, and I can't remember what the next one is. But it's trying to connect all of these dots together. And when you try to connect the dots, you need to know where the dot is first. So we are trying at the moment, trying to figure out where those dots are, how big they are, and what color they are. What do they do? And then connecting these dots is going to be the job of IDA, which is an organization, again, that's just been launched like 3 or 4 years ago or less. So that's the challenge. But I think the challenge that we have is to work together, not against each other, but to work together within the same goal. And I hope the goal is a noble goal, and that is to make all these interactions between peoples, wherever they are, positive and friendly and peaceful and so forth.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I was just going to quickly answer your question from a Tunisian perspective. I agree with you. The complementarity, I think, between the two diaspora is important. But the Tunisian diaspora in the United States is much smaller than in France, obviously. And so we needed to brand ourselves differently to differentiate ourselves. And we branded ourselves, in a way that sort of portrays what works here in the United States. Entrepreneurship is one of those things. And so we became sort of, somehow it's hard to be branded entrepreneur in France because things are slower, etc. So, but in the U.S.,
it's a French word.
in the U.S. it sounded like
so is bureaucracy.
It sounded right. I mean, at the end of the day, the U.S. is known for things like Hollywood and Silicon Valley and Wall Street and Washington. The power, those are the things. So we sort of align our brand to the general U.S. brand. And then as far as your second question, which is how to rally and sort of bring all the diaspora together, that's something we've been struggling with, obviously. But I think building small success stories and advertising them well through various channels, whether it's the embassy, the official channel, but also the university system. It all starts sort of at the university level. Has been effective in our case. We thought that if we had some solid success stories and we advertise them properly, that people will come to us instead of us going and looking for people. And so at the end of the day, that's what functioned.
So quickly, the question, and I will frame it differently in the sense that who is trying to organize the diaspora? Is it, in my case, Morocco trying to organize the diaspora in the United States, or is it the United States trying to organize the Moroccan diaspora? Because that has different, I would say, motivations. And from my own experience, in 2008, we ran an election. My friend Khalil was part of that, and we created the Moroccan American Coalition. I was elected president for that in 2008, and I learned a lot. And what I learned is that you organize a diaspora around emotional touch points, and those touch points can be gathered in some type of an index. And the highest level of that index can be family-oriented, family ties. And the bottom one can be as simple as food and music and cultural things. And again, that has also another dimension, which is who are we talking about, first generation or second, third, so forth, so on. Changes a lot. In short, because it's a very deep topic, what I've learned is that you can destroy a diaspora based on the wrong reasons by organizing them by the wrong reasons, because there's a lot of distrust and conflicts and inner fighting that happens within the community when it becomes either politically motivated or status motivated. And so again, we can take it offline. I can share with you my experience, but there's definitely a way to do that. Other very mature diasporas have been organized by themselves as time went by, but they did it for the right reasons: cultural, family ties. I think the Israeli diaspora, Jewish diaspora, is one of the best examples. Just how systematically they take children back to Israel, how they teach them about history, is something that happens within the community, motivated either by the synagogue or the community itself. It's not a political aspiration, perhaps later on in life, but I think as it happens from the beginning, it's the right way to organize a diaspora. So.
The bottom line, I think, is we shouldn't recreate the wheel because everything exists. There are structured diaspora groups. For the Irish diaspora is an amazingly well-oiled machine that in fact the diaspora I think is 40 million, whereas in Ireland there's 3 million people, and so that is really an oiled machine that has done tremendous effort. But you see the Indians, you see a number of diaspora function well, and in our particular case we learned a lot from frankly the Moroccan diaspora. Khalid was very instrumental in sort of giving us advice and setting up sort of the organization. Still remember his advice is, get people who have either money, time, or connections.
Not all three?
No, just
Connecting people, ideas, and capital. I remember that concept from somewhere. Well, thanks very much. I think we will have time for coffee, and I encourage all of you to speak. The one thing in closing, I'd say, one of the big issues, the themes that comes out of this is a lot of it is about networks, whether it's to find deal flow, to manage risk, to take advantage of an opportunity appropriately. And I think one of the challenges for the resources that PNB can bring to the table, they have 10 local chapters across the region, including in every country in the Maghreb. And these chapters have local entrepreneurs, groups of I think 10 to 15 people who on the ground know the business culture and are sophisticated enough to work with international investors. So in terms of idea flow, whether you have an idea or you're looking for an idea, that's a really great group for you guys to tap into with the PNB-NAPEO effort. And one of the challenges that I talked to Vanessa about, and this is great, we're convening here, but as I said, once you walk out the door, how do you keep the dialogue going? Because that's so critical. And one of the things, I don't know where you got to with your IT social media guy, I only popped this idea on her a few days ago, but which is some kind of virtual place where you guys can go to continue this dialogue. I think would be a great kind of thing to virtualize what you're doing on the ground already. So with that, let me thank our panelists. Jeremy, thanking them.
I just want to mention that thank you, first of all, so much to our amazing panelists and to Mahmoud for moderating. We have another amazing panel coming up. We're going to take a quick 10-minute break, and then we'll reconvene to talk specifically about a topic that they've mentioned, but in more depth, mentorship and education. So please come back after 10 minutes. There'll be refreshments outside. Thank you.
Nice meeting you.